Recently, Judge Andrew Napolitano and Matt Taibbi lamented the arrest of protesters in universities, saying their free speech rights were violated. Let's stop right there. A person's free speech rights end when it violates another person's rights. In this case, the protesters interfered with the right of other students to have their graduation ceremonies. And while students expressed support for the Hamas murderers, Jewish students were terrified for their safety. Considering that many physical altercations ensued, other students were denied their rights to an orderly and safe campus. There are public nuisance laws, folks, and the protesters should have gone to a cow pasture with their bullhorns. That is the appropriate place to spread their bullshit. Instead, they refused to disperse and were properly arrested. Many of the campus protesters carried signs and chanted "Stop the genocide." It may be that Israel could have been less brutal, but a defensive war is not genocide. Quite the opposite. It is Hamas who has called for genocide against the Jews. There were also signs and chants to free Palestine. The protesters don't even know or care about the history of Palestine. Perhaps the thrill of a campus protest is more important to them than the truth. And, by the way, why don't they protest the U.S.-sponsored proxy war in Ukraine that has killed over 400,000 citizens? Or is it simply more popular to protest the Jews? Whatever. A recent post by Hugh Fitzgerald at Jihad Watch explains that the, quote, Palestinian people, close quote, do not even exist. The phrase was adopted for political purposes. I quote, with permission. The phrase Palestinian people first came into existence in 1964 at the suggestion of the KGB, but the phrase really took off after the Arabs' defeat in the Six-Day War in 1967, when it was deemed necessary to reframe the Arab-Israeli conflict. No longer would that conflict be seen by the world as a gang-up by nearly 24 Arab countries on a single, small Jewish state, which is hardly discernible on a world map. Now it was presented as a war of national liberation by the so-called Palestinian people, who had been, so the Arabs insisted, cruelly dispossessed of their land by Jews. Zuhair Mohsen, the head of the Palestinians terror group, as Saika, and also a member of the PLO Executive Committee, blew the whistle on this propaganda. In 1977, he told an interviewer for the Dutch newspaper Trouw, quote, "The Palestinian people do not exist. The creation of a Palestinian state is only a means for continuing our struggle against the State of Israel for our Arab unity. In reality today, there is no difference between Jordanians, Palestinians, Syrians, and Lebanese. Only for political and tactical reasons do we speak today about the existence of a Palestinian people. We do it because Arab national interests demand that we posit the existence of a distinct Palestinian people to oppose Zionism. Yes, the existence of a separate Palestinian identity exists only for tactical reasons." Close quote. And there you have it. The cold, hard truth is a brutal shock to the uninformed. Now back to the useless protests. I view them and the intense coverage by the mass media as a distraction from the ongoing Marxist transformation of America. But if these pampered college students want to do something about the plight of the so-called Palestinians, they should move to Gaza. Their throats would be slit, of course, so maybe they should just drop out of college and send daddy's $80,000 tuition to Hamas. Oh wait, they don't pay tuition. I forgot. Biden is paying it from stolen taxpayer funds. Now let's dispose of the free speech myth. 1. Does the KKK have a right to free speech on campus, to protest white discrimination and critical race theory? 2. Did Donald Trump have a right to free speech when Judge Engoron placed him and his attorney under a gag order? 3. Did the arrested January 6 Capitol protesters who weren't even present at the Capitol have a right to free speech? 4. Do you have a right not to speak when you get a grand jury or trial subpoena? 5. When you file an IRS 1040 form to incriminate yourself under threat of imprisonment, do you have a right not to speak? 6. Did the Gitmo detainees, many of whom were innocent, have a right to free speech when they were tortured to speak? 7. Did parents have a right to free speech in schools to protest teaching critical race theory, genital mutilation, and drag shows? 8. Do any of us have free speech when every phone call, every text, and every email is captured by the NSA for future use against us? In each of these instances, you do indeed have a natural and God-given right to speak or not to speak, but you will be punished for exercising that right. So tell me why the political pundits constantly flap their gums about our free speech rights? Give me a break. The authorities don't recognize any of our rights, let alone free speech, and it's madness to believe otherwise. This national madness and capitulation to tyranny reminds me of the last 3 lines of a poem by Emily Dickinson. Assent, and you are sane. Demur, you're straightaway dangerous, and handled with a chain.